The human ambassador Marcus Chun had seen many strange things during his 3 years serving on Zephyria Prime, but nothing quite prepared him for the sight of the Zephyrian Queen's daughter hanging upside down from the crystal spires of the palace's highest tower. Princess Lyralii, all of 12 cycles old in her species counting, had somehow managed to climb the impossible heights of the living crystal formations that grew from the palace walls. The translucent blue structures stretched nearly 1,000 feet into the lavender sky, their surfaces smooth as glass and sharp as razors. No Zephyrian had ever climbed them successfully. Their lightweight, graceful bodies weren't built for such feats. Marcus stood in the courtyard below, squinting against the twin suns as he watched the small figure struggling against the crystal outcropping. The princess's silvery skin caught the light like liquid mercury, and her 4 delicate arms flailed helplessly as she tried to find purchase on the smooth surface. Her gossamer wings, still developing and weak, couldn't support her weight for more than a few seconds at a time. Ambassador Chun, came the melodious voice of Queen Seraleth behind him. Even in her obvious distress, the Zephyrian monarch's voice carried the musical quality that made their species such renowned diplomats. Your people, they are climbers, are they not? Marcus turned to face the queen, noting how her usually radiant silver skin had taken on a pale, almost white hue, a sure sign of extreme stress in her species. Her 6 eyes, arranged in pairs across her elegant face, were all fixed on the tiny figure above. The queen's own wings, magnificent spans of gossamer that could carry her gracefully through the air, trembled with barely contained emotion. "Some of us are, Your Majesty," Marcus replied carefully. He was already running calculations in his mind. The height, the smooth surface, the lack of proper equipment. It would be suicide for anyone to attempt such a climb without the right gear, and they didn't have time to fetch proper climbing equipment from the human embassy. "Our rescue teams cannot reach her." The queen continued, her voice beginning to show cracks in its usual melodic composure. "The crystal formations interfere with our flight patterns, and the surface is too smooth for our people to climb. She will fall soon. The crystal she clings to, it grows. It will push her away." Marcus looked up again. He could see what the queen meant. The crystal spires were living structures, constantly growing and reshaping themselves. The outcropping that currently supported the princess was slowly extending outward, gradually changing its angle. Soon, it would become too steep for even the princess's desperate grip to hold. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked. "Perhaps 20 of your minutes, no more," replied the queen's advisor, a tall Zephyrian named Corveth whose usually composed demeanor was cracking under the pressure. "The growing season has begun." The crystals reshaped themselves rapidly during this time. Marcus studied the tower again. The crystal surface would be impossible to climb with conventional techniques. But humans had something the Zephyrians didn't, a stubborn refusal to accept the impossible and the physical strength that came from evolving on a high-gravity world. "I need rope," Marcus said suddenly. "As much as you have. And something to create friction, cloth, leather, anything that can grip." "Ambassador," Queen Seraleth's voice carried a note of desperate hope. "You believe you can reach her?" Marcus was already stripping off his formal diplomatic jacket, revealing the practical clothing underneath. "Your Majesty, humans have a saying, where there's a will, there's a way. Your daughter isn't going to fall today, not if I can help it." The queen's 6 eyes widened. In Zephyrian culture, such a bold promise carried tremendous weight. To fail after making such a declaration would bring dishonor not just to Marcus, but to all of humanity. "Bring everything." The queen commanded her attendants. Quickly, within minutes, Marcus found himself equipped with nearly 300 feet of Zephyrian bio-rope, a strong, flexible material made from woven plant fibers. It was an ideal climbing rope, but it would have to do. He'd also been provided with strips of grip cloth, a material the Zephyrians used for handling delicate crystal work. Marcus began wrapping the grip cloth around his hands and feet, creating crude but effective climbing aids. The Zephyrian nobles who had gathered to watch murmured among themselves in their musical language. their voices rising and falling like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Has a human ever attempted such a climb?" asked Corveth. "Not exactly like this," Marcus admitted, testing his grip on a lower section of crystal. "But we're adaptable. It's what we do best." The truth was, Marcus had done some rock climbing in his youth, but nothing that could have prepared him for this. The crystal surface was unlike anything he'd ever encountered, simultaneously harder than stone and more fragile than glass. One wrong move could shatter sections of it, potentially bringing down debris on those below or creating an avalanche effect that could destabilize the entire spire. "Please be careful, Ambassador," the Queen said softly. "I cannot lose you both." Marcus looked up at the princess one more time. She had stopped struggling and was now hanging motionless, probably exhausted from her efforts. From this distance, he couldn't tell if she was conscious or simply conserving her strength. "I'll bring her down safely, Your Majesty," Marcus said. "That's a promise." He began to climb. The first 50 feet were manageable. The crystal surface near the base had more irregularities, small protrusions, and indentations that Marcus could use for handholds. The grip cloth helped significantly, providing just enough friction to prevent his hands and feet from sliding off the smooth surface. But as he climbed higher, the crystal became smoother, more perfect in its formation. Each handhold required careful searching, and Marcus found himself relying more and more on pure grip strength and determination. His human physiology, adapted for Earth's higher gravity, served him well. What would have been an impossible burden for a Zephyrian was merely exhausting for him. At 200 feet, Marcus paused to rest and check on the princess above. She was still there, still clinging to her precarious perch, but he could see that the crystal formation was indeed changing. The outcropping was slowly rotating, becoming more vertical with each passing minute. "How does it look?" came the Queen's voice from below, amplified by some kind of Zephyrian communication device. "Still climbing, Your Majesty," Marcus called back. "She's holding on." What he didn't mention was that his hands were starting to cramp, and the grip cloth was beginning to fray from the constant friction against the crystal surface. He had maybe 200 feet to go, but each foot was becoming more difficult than the last. At 300 feet, disaster nearly struck. Marcus's left hand slipped just as he was transferring his weight to a new hold. For a terrifying moment, he hung by one hand, his feet scrambling against the smooth crystal surface. The bio rope, secured to his climbing harness, went taut as he swung slightly away from the wall. Below, he heard gasps and musical exclamations of distress from the Zephyrian observers. Marcus forced himself to remain calm. Panic would only waste energy and cloud his judgment. He took a deep breath, found a foothold, and carefully repositioned himself against the crystal surface. "Still here," he called down, though his voice was beginning to show the strain. 50 more feet. The princess was close now, close enough that Marcus could hear her labored breathing. She had definitely seen him coming. Her forearms were moving again, though weakly. "Princess," Marcus called softly as he approached. "I'm Ambassador Chen. I'm here to help you." Princess Lyralii turned her head toward him, and Marcus saw eyes very much like her mother's, 6 silvery orbs that seemed to hold depths of intelligence beyond her apparent age. She said something in the musical Zephyrian language that Marcus didn't understand, but her tone conveyed gratitude and relief. The crystal outcropping she clung to was indeed rotating, now at almost a 45-degree angle. Marcus could see that she wouldn't be able to hold on much longer. Her grip was weakening, and the smooth surface offered no mercy. Marcus positioned himself carefully on the main spire, just below the outcropping. He secured his climbing rope to his harness and began fashioning a second line for the princess. "Princess, I'm going to throw you a rope," he said, hoping she understood at least some human speech. "Grab it with one of your arms, and I'll pull you to safety." The throw had to be perfect. Too short, and the princess wouldn't be able to reach it. Too far, and the rope might become tangled in the crystal formations above. Marcus gauged the distance, accounted for the slight wind at this altitude, and made his throw. The rope sailed through the air and landed perfectly across the princess's midsection. She immediately grasped it with one of her 4 arms, holding tight. "Good girl," Marcus muttered, beginning to pull her toward the main spire. But as he did, the crystal outcropping gave a sharp crack. The growing formation had reached a critical stress point. It was in a break. Marcus had perhaps seconds to act. He braced himself against the main spire and pulled with all his strength, hauling the princess toward him just as the crystal outcropping shattered, sending glittering fragments tumbling into the courtyard below. Princess Lyralii swung toward him, and Marcus caught her with one arm while maintaining his grip on the spire with the other. She was lighter than he'd expected. The low gravity of Zephyria Prime and the princess's naturally delicate build made her seem almost weightless to someone accustomed to Earth's heavier pull. "I've got you," Marcus said softly, securing the princess against his side. "You're safe now." The climb down was slower but less nerve-wracking than the ascent. Marcus took his time, testing each hold carefully and ensuring that both he and the princess were secure before moving to the next position. Princess Lyralii proved to be an excellent climbing partner, somehow instinctively knowing when to shift her weight or adjust her position to help with their descent. When they finally reached the ground, Queen Seraleth rushed forward, her 6 eyes bright with tears of relief. She gathered her daughter into her 4 arms, speaking rapidly in the musical Zephyrian language while covering the princess's head with gentle kisses. Marcus stepped back, breathing heavily and feeling the full exhaustion of the climb settling into his muscles. His hands were scraped and bleeding through the torn grip cloth, and every muscle in his body ached. "Ambassador Chun," the queen said, finally, looking up from her reunion with her daughter. "There are no words in any language for what you have done today. You risked your life for one who is not even of your species. Any decent person would have done the same, Your Majesty," Marcus replied, though he was too tired to put much conviction behind the diplomatic response. "No," the queen said firmly. "Not any person. A Zephyrian would not have possessed the physical capability. A Krellian would not have risked their own safety. A Volthri would have calculated the odds and declared the attempt impossible. Only a human would have looked at that climb and said, 'I will try anyway.'" Marcus smiled weakly. "We're stubborn that way." The queen stood, still keeping one arm around her daughter. "You have given me back what is most precious to me in all the galaxy. This debt can never be repaid, but it will never be forgotten." As Marcus was led away to receive medical attention for his scraped hands, he couldn't help but feel that something significant had just happened, something that went beyond simple rescue. The way Queen Seraleth had looked at him, the way her voice had changed when she spoke of the debt between them, suggested that this event would have consequences far beyond what anyone could anticipate. He had no idea how right he was. 3 months had passed since the rescue, and the relationship between humanity and the Zephyrian Empire had transformed in ways that surprised everyone involved in galactic politics. What had begun as a minor diplomatic posting had evolved into something approaching a true alliance, with trade agreements and cultural exchanges flowing between the two species at an unprecedented rate. Marcus Chun found himself at the center of it all, no longer just an ambassador, but something approaching a personal friend to the royal family. Princess Lyralii had taken to visiting him regularly, bringing him samples of Zephyrian art and music while pestering him with endless questions about human culture and the legendary world called Earth. "Tell me again about the mountains that breathe fire," the princess said during one of her visits, her 6 eyes bright with curiosity as she perched on the edge of Marcus's desk in his embassy office. "Volcanoes," Marcus corrected with a smile. "And they don't really breathe. The fire comes from melted rock deep under the ground that gets pushed up and out. But the rock melts? How hot must your world be?" "Actually, it's the pressure and heat deep underground that melts it. The surface of Earth is much cooler than Zephyria Prime, believe it or not," Princess Lyraliai's wings fluttered with excitement. A gesture Marcus had learned indicated deep interest or enthusiasm in young Zephyrians. I want to see it someday. Mother says when I'm older, perhaps I can travel with a diplomatic mission. I'd be happy to show you around, Marcus said. Though you need to be careful. Earth's gravity is much stronger than what you're used to here. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Queen Saraleth herself, accompanied by her usual retinue of advisors. But something was different this time. The Queen's silver skin had taken on a darker, more metallic hue that Marcus had learned indicated serious concern or stress. Ambassador Chun, the Queen said, her musical voice carrying an unusual undertone of urgency. I must speak with you privately. It concerns a matter of galactic security. Marcus nodded and gestured for the princess to join her mother's attendants in the outer office. Once they were alone, Queen Saraleth's composed demeanor seemed to crack slightly. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected something approaching from the void beyond the galactic rim, the Queen began. At first, we believed it to be a natural phenomenon, perhaps a rogue asteroid or comet. But further analysis has revealed it to be artificial in nature. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. A ship. Ships, the Queen corrected. Hundreds of them, possibly thousands. They are still too distant for detailed scanning, but what we can determine is troubling. They appear to be constructed from some form of organic material, and they are heading directly for the core systems of the galaxy. Do we know who they are? What they want? The Queen's 6 eyes focused on Marcus with an intensity he'd rarely seen. We have encountered them before, Ambassador Chun. Long ago, before your species achieved spaceflight, before even the Krellian Empire reached its height. They call themselves the Devourers, and they are exactly what their name suggests. Marcus sat down heavily in his chair. A hostile first contact scenario. Not first contact, the Queen said grimly. This is a return. The last time they came, nearly 15,000 years ago, they consumed 12 entire star systems before a coalition of species managed to drive them back into the void. The cost was enormous. Entire civilizations were lost. And now they're coming back. Yes, our estimates suggest they will reach the outer colonies within 6 months. The core worlds, including Zephyria Prime and Earth, have perhaps a year before they arrive. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. What kind of military response are we looking at? That is the problem, Queen Saraleth said, her voice taking on a tone of deep frustration. The Galactic Council has been in emergency session for the past 2 days. The Krellian Empire insists on a defensive strategy, fortifying core systems and sacrificing the outer colonies. The Voltheri Collective wants to attempt diplomatic contact, believing that any species capable of interstellar travel must be reasonable. The Aquarian Federation proposes evacuation to the far rim. And the Zephyrian position? We believe in taking the fight to them before they can establish a foothold in our galaxy, the Queen said firmly. Strike hard, strike fast, and drive them back before they can adapt to our current technological capabilities. Marcus nodded slowly. That makes sense from a tactical standpoint. What do you need from humanity? Queen Saraleth was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a weight of careful consideration. Ambassador, I've spent the last 3 months studying your species. Not just your diplomatic records or your technological capabilities, but your history, your wars, your struggles, your triumphs. And what have you learned? That humans are the most militaristic species in the galaxy, and also the most adaptable. The Krellians are strong, but rigid in their thinking. The Voltheri are intelligent, but overly cautious. The Aquarians are peaceful, but lack the stomach for true warfare. But humans... The Queen's voice trailed off as she searched for the right words. Humans fight dirty, Marcus said with a slight smile. We cheat, we improvise, and we never give up even when we should. Precisely. In the last war against the Devourers, the coalition forces fought bravely and eventually succeeded, but at a terrible cost. We fought them on their terms, using their tactics, meeting their conventional warfare with our own. The result was a grinding battle of attrition that lasted decades and consumed entire worlds. Marcus was beginning to understand where this conversation was leading. You want humanity to lead a military response. I want humanity to show the rest of us how to fight a war the way humans fight wars, the Queen said. Unconventionally, aggressively, with the kind of desperate creativity that comes from refusing to accept defeat. Your Majesty, with all due respect, I'm a diplomat, not a military commander. I couldn't lead a battle group if I wanted to, but you could advise those who can. More importantly, you could help convince the Galactic Council to accept human leadership of the military response. The other species trust you, Ambassador Chun. They have seen what humans can accomplish when properly motivated. Marcus thought about the Crystal Spire, about the impossible climb that had somehow become possible through sheer human stubbornness. What kind of forces would we be looking at? What's the scale of the threat? Queen Seraleth activated a holographic display on Marcus's desk, showing a three-dimensional map of the local galactic region. Red markers indicated the approaching Devourer fleet, while blue showed the positions of major Alliance worlds. Intelligence suggests approximately 3,000 ships of various sizes, the Queen explained. Their largest vessels are roughly equivalent to our heavy cruisers, but they appear to be grown rather than built. Organic technology that can adapt and evolve during combat. Biological warfare on a galactic scale, Marcus mused. How many ships can the Alliance muster? Collectively? Perhaps 800 modern vessels, with another 2,000 older ships that could be pressed into service. We are significantly outnumbered, but not outgunned necessarily, Marcus said, studying the display. Superior technology and tactics can overcome numerical disadvantage, especially if the enemy hasn't faced our current capabilities before. That is our hope. But it will require unity among the Alliance species, and that unity will only come if someone can convince them to set aside their traditional approaches to warfare. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, staring at the holographic display and running calculations in his mind. The tactical situation was challenging, but not impossible. The key would be preventing the Devourers from establishing a beachhead in the galaxy and forcing them to fight while extended from their supply lines. I'll need to speak with Earth Command, he finally said. This kind of decision is way above my pay grade. But I can tell you that if humanity agrees to take a leadership role, we'll want to do things our way. Which means no sacred ground that can't be sacrificed if necessary. No battles fought for honor instead of victory. No holding back on weapons or tactics because they're considered unsporting. If we're going to fight this war, we fight it to win, whatever the cost. Queen Seraleth nodded gravely. I understand, and I agree. The survival of our civilizations is more important than our sensibilities about proper conduct in warfare. There's one more thing, Marcus said, looking up from the display. If we do this, if humanity takes on this responsibility, we're going to need the complete trust and support of our allies. No second-guessing, no political interference during military operations. You will have it, the Queen said without hesitation, at least from the Zephyrian Empire. I'll transmit a priority message to Earth immediately, Marcus said, standing up. But I should warn you, humans have a saying about the cure sometimes being worse than the disease. Meaning, when humans wage war, really wage war, we tend to reshape everything around us. Win or lose, the galaxy that emerges from this conflict won't be the same as the one we have now. Queen Seraleth considered this for a moment, then nodded slowly. Perhaps that is what we need. Change. Evolution. The old ways of doing things have led us to this moment of crisis. Perhaps it is time for something new. As the Queen and her retinue departed, Marcus found himself alone with the weight of galactic responsibility settling on his shoulders. 3 months ago, he had been a mid-level diplomat handling trade negotiations and cultural exchanges. Now he was potentially about to become a key figure in a war that would determine the fate of every sapient species in the galaxy. He activated his secure communication array and began composing a message to Earth Command. As he wrote, he couldn't help but think about Princess Lyralii and her innocent questions about Earth's volcanoes. If this war went badly, she might never get the chance to see them. That thought alone was enough to steel his resolve. The Devourers had made a mistake in returning to a galaxy that now included humanity. They were about to learn what happened when you threatened something a human cared about. The message to Earth was brief, but comprehensive. Priority Alpha. Galaxy-wide military crisis. Hostile alien fleet estimated at 3,000 ships approaching core systems. Alliance requests human leadership of military response. My recommendation: accept. Time factor critical. Full briefing data attached. Ambassador Chun. As the quantum transmission burst toward Earth at faster-than-light speeds, Marcus Chun settled back in his chair and began studying the tactical displays more carefully. If Earth Command accepted the Alliance proposal, he was going to need to become an expert on interstellar warfare very quickly. The Devourers were coming, but they were about to face something they had never encountered before: human military doctrine backed by galactic resources. It was going to be interesting. The response from Earth Command arrived faster than Marcus had expected, transmitted via emergency quantum burst just 18 hours after his initial message. What he read made his blood run cold. Message acknowledged. Fleet Admiral Sarah Rodriguez en route with Task Force Ragnarok. ETA, 72 hours. Prepare for immediate assumption of military command authority. Warning: Admiral Rodriguez operates under Protocol 7 authorization. Civilian authorities advised to maintain distance during combat operations. Earth Command sends regards and reminds you that failure is not an option. Message ends. Marcus had heard of Protocol 7, though he'd hoped never to encounter in practice. It was the authorization given to Earth fleet commanders when facing existential threats to humanity or its allies. Under Protocol 7, a fleet admiral had complete authority to use any means necessary to achieve victory, up to and including weapons and tactics that were normally forbidden by various galactic conventions. Admiral Sarah Rodriguez was a legend in Earth Fleet, known for her tactical brilliance and her absolute refusal to accept defeat. She had earned her reputation during the Proxima incident, where she had successfully defended Earth's first major colony against a massive pirate fleet using nothing but 3 destroyers and what the history books diplomatically called unconventional tactics. The stories about what those tactics actually involved were classified, but rumors suggested they had included ramming attacks, improvised nuclear mines, and the use of civilian freighters as improvised fireships. The pirates had been completely destroyed, but the diplomatic fallout had nearly cost Rodriguez her career. Now, apparently, Earth Command had decided that her particular brand of warfare was exactly what the situation called for. 3 days later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of Zephyria Prime's orbital station, watching as Task Force Ragnarok emerged from hyperspace. What he saw took his breath away. The human fleet was unlike anything he had ever witnessed. Where other species built their warships for elegance or intimidation, Earth Fleet had clearly designed theirs for one purpose only: destroying the enemy as efficiently as possible. The ships were angular, aggressive-looking things bristling with weapons systems and armored like fortresses. Leading the formation was Rodriguez's flagship, the Earth Fleet Super Dreadnought Indomitable. At nearly 2 kilometers long and massing more than a small moon, it was a monument to human engineering and human stubbornness. Its hull was scarred from previous battles, and Marcus could see modification points where additional weapon systems had been added in apparent violation of every design aesthetic principle the other galactic species held dear. Behind the Indomitable came a formation of heavy cruisers, destroyers, and support vessels that stretched across space like a steel constellation. But what truly impressed Marcus was the diversity of the fleet. Human military doctrine apparently favored mixing different ship classes and weapon systems in the same formation, creating a tactical flexibility that other species rarely attempted. Impressive, came a musical voice behind him. Marcus turned to find Queen Seraleth approaching, accompanied by Princess Lyralii and what appeared to be half the Zephyrian royal court. Admiral Rodriguez doesn't believe in half measures, Marcus replied. When she fights a war, she brings everything she can carry. The princess insisted on watching the arrival, the queen said with obvious maternal fondness. She has become quite fascinated with human military technology since her rescue mission. Princess Lyralii fluttered her wings excitedly. Ambassador Chun, are those really fusion torpedoes on the largest ship? The energy readings are enormous. Marcus smiled. I'm not supposed to discuss specific weapon systems, Princess. But, yes, humans tend to believe in making very large explosions when necessary. Admiral Rodriguez is requesting permission to come aboard the station, announced a Zephyrian communications officer. She wishes to meet with Alliance Command staff immediately. Grant permission, Queen Seraleth ordered, and assemble the full council. It appears the human command style is as direct as their ship design. An hour later, Marcus found himself in the station's main conference chamber, watching as Admiral Rodriguez strode through the doors with an escort of human marines. The admiral was exactly what Marcus had expected from her reputation, a tall, imposing woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to catalog every potential threat in the room within seconds of her arrival. Your Majesty, Rodriguez said, offering a precise military bow to Queen Seraleth. Admiral Sarah Rodriguez, commanding Task Force Ragnarok, and assuming operational control of Alliance military forces by unanimous vote of the Galactic Council. Unanimous? Queen Seraleth asked with surprise. The Krellian Empire changed their position after reviewing our tactical proposals, Rodriguez replied with a slight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Apparently, the prospect of human-led orbital bombardment was more appealing than their original defensive strategy. Marcus winced. Human orbital bombardment doctrine was notoriously thorough, prioritizing complete elimination of threats over surgical precision. It was effective, but it tended to leave very large craters where enemy positions used to be. Admiral, Marcus said, stepping forward, perhaps you could brief us on your strategic assessment? Rodriguez activated a holographic display that showed the current positions of both Alliance and Devourer forces. The situation is worse than your initial intelligence suggested, Ambassador. Our long-range sensors have identified a fourth element to the Devourer fleet, what appear to be massive bioships designed for planetary consumption. The hologram zoomed in on the approaching enemy formation, revealing ship designs that looked more grown than built. The vessels were organic in appearance, with hulls that seemed to pulse and writhe even in the static display. They're not just planning to conquer our worlds, Rodriguez continued. They intend to consume them entirely. Strip mine them down to the core for raw materials to build more ships. The Alliance representatives around the table exchanged looks of horror. Princess Lyralii moved closer to her mother, her young features showing fear for the first time since Marcus had known her. What do you propose? Asked the Krellian military attaché, a massive beetle-like creature whose carapace reflected the chamber's lighting. We hit them before they reached the inner systems, Rodriguez said without hesitation. Mobile warfare, multiple simultaneous strikes designed to fragment their formation and prevent them from establishing any kind of defensive perimeter. That would require our forces to operate deep in hostile territory, observed the Volthry representative, a crystalline being whose faceted form sparkled as it spoke. The risks would be enormous. The risks of letting them reach our home systems would be greater, Rodriguez replied. I've reviewed the records of their previous incursion. Every battle where Alliance forces attempted a purely defensive strategy resulted in eventual defeat. The only victories came when aggressive tactics were employed. Define aggressive, requested the Aquarian delegate, an amphibious creature whose skin glistened with moisture. Rodriguez's smile became predatory. Human aggressive. We're going to introduce the Devourers to concepts they've never encountered before. Electronic warfare, psychological operations, asymmetric tactics, and, if necessary, weapons that other species consider too dangerous for practical use. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Admiral, When you say too dangerous, I mean fusion ramming, Ambassador. Suicide attacks using drone ships loaded with antimatter charges. Biological warfare using engineered pathogens. Kinetic bombardment with relativistic projectiles. Whatever it takes to win. The chamber fell silent. Even by human standards, Rodriguez was proposing tactics that pushed the boundaries of acceptable warfare. Admiral, Queen Saraleth said carefully, while we appreciate the need for decisive action, surely there are limits to what we should be willing to do. Your Majesty, Rodriguez replied, her voice taking on an edge of steel. I've seen what the Devourers do to conquered worlds. There are no survivors, no prisoners, no mercy. They literally consume everything, buildings, people, entire ecosystems, and convert all into more ships for their fleet. Against an enemy like that, conventional limits become a luxury we cannot afford. Princess Lyralii spoke up suddenly, her young voice carrying clearly across the chamber. Admiral Rodriguez, if we use those terrible weapons, how are we different from them? Rodriguez turned to look at the princess, and, for a moment, her harsh expression softened. Princess, the difference is that we're willing to stop when the war is over. They won't. If we don't defeat them completely, they'll just keep coming back, stronger each time, until there's nothing left of any of our civilizations. But, surely, the Volthri representative interjected, diplomatic contact should be attempted first. Perhaps they can be reasoned with. Rodriguez's expression hardened again. The last diplomatic mission to contact the Devourers 15,000 years ago resulted in an entire planet being consumed and converted into organic war material. The diplomat's final transmission was a warning to never attempt communication again. Marcus studied the tactical display, noting the positioning and estimated capabilities of both fleets. Admiral, what kind of timeline are we looking at? Best case scenario, we intercept them in the Kepler void in approximately 4 months, Rodriguez replied. That gives us time to conduct joint training exercises with Alliance forces and modify our tactics based on their capabilities. And worst case, they accelerate their approach using methods we don't understand, and we end up fighting them in the home systems with minimal preparation time. Rodriguez's expression was grim. In that scenario, we'd be looking at a purely defensive action with limited strategic options. Queen Saraleth was quiet for a long moment, her 6 eyes focused on the holographic display. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute decision. Admiral Rodriguez, the Zephyrian Empire places all our military forces under your command. We will provide whatever support you require, including access to technologies and resources that we would normally consider classified, as does the Krellian Empire, rumbled the military attaché. The Volthri collective agrees, added the crystalline delegate, though with obvious reluctance. The Aquarian Federation will support the Alliance decision, said the amphibious representative. Rodriguez nodded grimly. Then, we begin preparation immediately. Ambassador Chun, I'll need you to coordinate with the various species intelligence services. We need to know everything they have on Devourer technology, tactics, and psychology. Understood, Admiral. Your Majesty, Rodriguez said, turning back to Queen Saraleth. I'll need to establish a forward command base somewhere in the outer systems, preferably a location with minimal civilian population and strong defensive positions. The Kepler station would serve your purposes, the Queen replied. It's a mining installation in the asteroid belt of the Kepler system. Remote, defensible, and equipped with industrial facilities that could support fleet operations. Perfect. We'll begin moving forces there within the week. Rodriguez paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, I want to be absolutely clear about what we're undertaking. This war will not be fought like previous conflicts. It will be brutal, decisive, and final. When it's over, either the Devourers will be completely destroyed, or we will be. Princess Lyralii looked up at her mother with wide, frightened eyes. Mother, will we win? Queen Saraleth placed a gentle hand on her daughter's head, but her 6 eyes remained fixed on Admiral Rodriguez. Yes, my dear, we will win. The humans have promised us that, and they have never broken a promise to us. Marcus hoped the Queen's faith in human military capabilities was justified, because Admiral Rodriguez was right about one thing. This war was going to be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The age of human warfare was about to begin. The Battle of the Kepler Void began exactly 4 months later, and it was unlike any conflict in recorded galactic history. Marcus Chun watched from the command bridge of the Indomitable as the combined Alliance fleet moved into position. 300 ships representing 5 different species, all coordinated under Admiral Rodriguez's unified command structure. It was a testament to human diplomatic and military integration capabilities that such a diverse force could operate as a cohesive unit. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV," announced the sensor operator, a young human ensign whose voice remained steady despite the magnitude of what they were facing. Estimated 3,000-plus vessels, various configurations. On the main display, the Devourer fleet appeared as a writhing mass of organic ships that seemed to pulse and undulate even in the vacuum of space. They moved not in the rigid formations favored by most military forces, but in flowing patterns that resembled schools of predatory fish or flocks of hunting birds. "They're beautiful," whispered Princess Lyrelii, who stood beside Marcus despite her mother's protests about her presence on a military vessel during combat operations. Admiral Rodriguez had surprisingly supported the princess's request to observe the battle, stating that future leaders needed to understand the true cost of war. "Beautiful and deadly," Marcus replied quietly. "Those ships are grown, not built. They can repair battle damage, adapt their weapon systems, and probably reproduce themselves given enough raw materials." Admiral Rodriguez's voice cut across the bridge chatter with calm authority. "All ships, this is Flag. Initiate Battle Plan Alpha on my mark. Remember, we hit hard, we hit fast, and we do not give them time to adapt. Execute." Mark. What followed was a masterpiece of human tactical doctrine applied on an interstellar scale. The Alliance fleet split into 7 different attack formations, each approaching the Devourer fleet from a different vector. But instead of the head-on assault that galactic military tradition would have dictated, Rodriguez had designed something far more sophisticated. The first wave consisted entirely of unmanned drone ships, each one loaded with sophisticated electronic warfare packages and kinetic penetrators. They screamed toward the Devourer formation at maximum acceleration, broadcasting false sensor signatures and jamming communications across multiple frequencies. "Electronic warfare drones have achieved target penetration," reported the tactical officer. "Enemy formation is showing signs of confusion. Their coordination patterns are breaking down." The second wave followed immediately behind the drones, fast attack corvettes crewed by humans and equipped with experimental weapon systems that had never been tested in actual combat. They struck at the disrupted edges of the Devourer formation like surgical knives, targeting what appeared to be command and control vessels. "I'm reading massive biological trauma signatures from the target ships," announced the science officer, a Zephyrian whose 6 eyes were wide with amazement. "Whatever those weapons are doing, it's causing systemic failure across their organic hulls." Marcus had been briefed on the new weapon systems. Human military engineers had developed something they called biodisruptor torpedoes, devices that interfered with the complex biochemical processes that kept the Devourer ships alive. It was a weapon that could only have been conceived by a species that had spent millennia fighting biological diseases and parasites. The third wave was where Admiral Rodriguez revealed the true scope of her tactical planning. Heavy cruisers and battleships emerged from hyperspace at point-blank range, having used the distraction of the first 2 waves to approach undetected. They opened fire immediately with focused antimatter beams and fusion torpedoes, targeting the largest Devourer vessels. "Multiple capital ship kills confirmed," reported the tactical officer with barely contained excitement. "Enemy formation is fragmenting." But the Devourers were not helpless. As their initial shock wore off, they began to respond with their own adaptive tactics. The organic ships started to merge and combine, forming larger, more heavily armored vessels that could withstand the Alliance bombardment. They're adapting faster than our projections indicated, warned the science officer. Some of those combined vessels are showing weapon signatures we've never seen before. Admiral Rodriguez's expression never changed. Then we adapt faster. All ships execute Battle Plan Beta. Authorization codes Tango 77. Marcus felt his blood chill. Battle Plan Beta involved the deployment of weapons that the Alliance had hoped never to use. Across the fleet, specially modified human destroyers began launching what appeared to be simple kinetic projectiles. But these projectiles were traveling at nearly 10% the speed of light, and their targets were the massive bioships that the Devourers had formed by merging their smaller vessels. The impact of relativistic projectiles on organic matter was catastrophic. Entire Devourer capital ships simply disintegrated, their biological hulls unable to withstand the enormous kinetic energy transfer. The vacuum of space filled with glowing plasma as matter was converted to pure energy. Sweet mother of starlight, breathed Princess Lyralii. How is such destruction possible? Physics, Princess, Marcus replied grimly. Mass times velocity squared. When humans decide to break something, we tend to be very thorough about it. The Devourer response was swift and terrifying. The surviving ships began to emit some kind of psychic or electromagnetic field that interfered with the nervous systems of most Alliance crew members. Across the fleet, non-human personnel began collapsing at their stations as the alien influence overwhelmed their minds. But humans, it seemed, were largely immune to the effect. All non-human personnel to shielded compartments. Admiral Rodriguez ordered calmly. Human crew members assume all critical stations. This is what we trained for. Marcus watched in fascination as the bridge crew seamlessly reorganized itself. The Zephyrian science officer stumbled toward the shielded sections of the ship, supported by a human ensign, while human backup personnel took over the critical sensor and communication stations. It appears, Princess Lorelei said with obvious effort, fighting against the psychic interference, that human minds are differently constructed than ours. More primitive, some would say, Marcus replied, helping to support the princess as they moved toward the shielded area. But sometimes primitive is exactly what you need. The battle continued with only human crews operating the Alliance ships. And somehow, impossibly, they began to win. Admiral Rodriguez had anticipated the possibility of psychic warfare and had equipped her fleet accordingly. Human military doctrine had long included contingencies for fighting enemies who possessed capabilities that humans lacked. The solution was typically to overwhelm such advantages with superior numbers, better tactics, or more devastating weapons. In this case, it was all three. The fourth wave of the attack consisted of human-crewed ships launching what Admiral Rodriguez called planet crackers, antimatter bombs designed originally for asteroid mining, but repurposed for military use. The explosions were visible across multiple star systems, each one consuming dozens of Devourer vessels in expanding spheres of annihilation. The fifth wave was even more devastating. Admiral Rodriguez had held back her most dangerous weapon until the end, a small fleet of ships equipped with experimental space-time manipulation devices. These weapons created localized distortions in the fabric of reality itself, trapping Devourer vessels in temporal loops or crushing them with artificially generated gravitational fields. Admiral, called a tactical officer, we're reading total enemy casualties at approximately 80%. Remaining Devourer vessels are attempting to withdraw. Rodriguez's expression was stone cold. No survivors, no retreat. All ships pursue and destroy. I want every single one of those things eliminated before they can escape to threaten another galaxy. The final phase of the battle was less a fight than it was an execution. Human ships hunted down the fleeing Devourers with ruthless efficiency, using long-range weapons and superior speed to prevent any escape. The organic ships tried desperately to adapt to each new human tactic, but they were simply overwhelmed by the diversity and creativity of human warfare. When it was over, 3,000 of our ships had been reduced to expanding clouds of organic debris drifting through the Kepler void. The Alliance had lost 67 vessels, mostly to the psychic attacks that had disabled their non-human crews. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, surveying the aftermath of the battle with grim satisfaction. All ships begin search and rescue operations for Alliance survivors. Science teams, I want detailed analysis of all Devour wreckage. We need to confirm that nothing is left alive. Marcus emerged from the shielded compartments with Princess Lyralii, who was looking pale but determined. Admiral, that was comprehensive. It had to be, Rodriguez replied without emotion. Species like the Devourers don't understand mercy or restraint. They only understand complete destruction. Will they come back? Asked Princess Lyralii. Admiral Rodriguez looked down at the young Zephyrian princess, and, for the first time since the battle began, her expression softened slightly. Not for misdirection, princess, but the galaxy is a big place. There might be others like them out there. And if there are, then humanity will be ready for them too. As the Alliance fleet began the long journey home, Marcus found himself reflecting on what he had witnessed. The Battle of the Kepler Void would be remembered as the moment when humanity truly announced its presence as a major galactic power. But it would also be remembered as something else. The day when the galaxy learned what humans were willing to do to protect what they cared about. The Devourers had made a critical error in their calculations. They had encountered human military doctrine at its most refined and ruthless. They had faced an enemy that fought not just to win battles, but to eliminate threats completely and permanently. And they had lost. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this victory had come at a cost that would only become clear in the years to come. Admiral Rodriguez had been right about one thing. The galaxy that emerged from this war would be very different from the one that had entered it. The age of human galactic dominance had begun, written in the ashes of 3,000 alien warships, and sealed with weapons that other species could barely comprehend. Princess Lyralii pressed close to the observation window, staring out at the debris field that had once been an invasion fleet. Ambassador Chun, she said quietly, I think I understand now why Mother values human friendship so highly. Marcus nodded grimly. And I think the rest of the galaxy is about to learn the same lesson. 5 years had passed since the Battle of the Kepler Void, and the galaxy had indeed changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Humanity had emerged as the unofficial military leaders of the galactic community, while maintaining their diplomatic relationships through careful negotiation and genuine friendship. Marcus Chun, now bearing the title of Special Ambassador for Interspecies Affairs, stood once again in the crystal gardens of the Zephyrian Royal Palace. But this time, he was not there for routine diplomatic business. This time, he was dying. The exotic radiation from the Devourer weapons had been more insidious than anyone had realized. During the battle, when the psychic attacks had forced most non-human crew members into shielded compartments, Marcus had remained on the bridge to help coordinate communications between human and alien forces. He had been exposed to levels of radiation that were only now showing their true effects. The Zephyrian doctors had done everything possible. Their biomanipulation technology was the most advanced in the galaxy, capable of healing injuries and diseases that would be fatal to most species. But the radiation damage was too extensive, too deeply integrated into his cellular structure. They could slow the progression, ease the pain, but they could not reverse the inevitable. Marcus had perhaps days left, maybe a week if he was lucky. Princess Lyralii, now 17 years old and bearing the formal title of Crown Princess and heir to the throne, sat beside his bed in the medical facility. She had grown into a remarkable young woman, combining her mother's diplomatic intelligence with a deep understanding of human culture and psychology that had made her one of the most effective ambassadors in the galaxy. Tell me again about the mountains that breathe fire, she said softly, using the same words she had spoken as a child. Marcus smiled weakly. Volcanoes, princess. They're called volcanoes. And I promised I'd show them to you someday, didn't I? You did. And I still intend to hold you to that promise. I'm afraid that's going to be difficult, given the circumstances. Princess Lyraliai's 6 eyes flashed with something that Marcus recognized as pure Zephyrian determination. Ambassador, there's something I need to tell you. Something my mother and I have been working on for the past 2 years. Before Marcus could respond, Queen Seraleth entered the medical facility, accompanied by a team of what appeared to be both Zephyrian biotechnicians and human medical specialists. The Queen's expression was intense, focused in a way that Marcus had learned to associate with royal decisions of enormous importance. Ambassador Chen, the Queen said without preamble, I am about to make you an offer that has never been extended to a member of another species in the entire history of the Zephyrian Empire. Marcus tried to sit up, though the effort was exhausting. Your Majesty, I'm not sure I understand. 5 years ago, you risked your life to save my daughter. You climbed an impossible crystal spire because a child was in danger. You made a promise to me that day, and you kept it. Any decent person would have done the same. No, Queen Seraleth said firmly. Any decent person would have tried. You succeeded. And then, during the war against the Devourers, you placed yourself in harm's way again to protect not just my family, but every family in the galaxy. Princess Lyraliai took Marcus's hand gently. Ambassador, what my mother is trying to say is that you have become more than a friend to our family. You have become family. The Zephyrian Empire has a concept that does not exist in any other known culture, Queen Seraleth explained. It is called Kelistari, the adoption of one who has given their life in service to others. It has been invoked only 12 times in our entire recorded history. Marcus felt a strange sensation, as if the world around him was becoming more vivid and intense despite his weakening condition. What does that mean, practically speaking? It means, said one of the human medical specialists, a woman Marcus didn't recognize, that you're about to become the first human to undergo complete Zephyrian biological integration. We're going to save your life, Ambassador Chun, but you're going to come out of it significantly changed. Change how? You will retain your human consciousness, your memories, your personality, Queen Seraleth explained. But your body will be reconstructed using Zephyrian biotechnology. You will have our longevity, our physical capabilities, our resistance to radiation and disease. In every legal and cultural sense, you will become a member of the royal family. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. Your Majesty, this is an incredible honor, but I have to ask, what's the catch? This kind of technology doesn't come without costs. Princess Lyraliai smiled, and Marcus saw both her mother's wisdom and something uniquely her own in the expression. The catch, Ambassador, is that you'll be stuck with us for the next few thousand years. Zephyrian lifespans are considerably longer than human ones. And Queen Seraleth added more seriously, you will be bound by certain obligations. As a member of the royal family, you would have formal responsibilities to the Empire and to the galaxy as a whole. What kind of responsibilities? The kind that someone with your experience and judgment should probably be handling anyway, said Admiral Rodriguez, who had apparently arrived while Marcus was focused on the Queen's explanation. Marcus, the Galactic Council has been discussing the creation of a new position, Supreme Military Coordinator for Interspecies Defense. Someone who can work with all the member species to prepare for future threats. Marcus looked around the room at the assembled faces, human, Zephyrian, and even a few representatives from other species who had quietly entered during the conversation. This sounds like something you've all been planning for a while. 2 years, confirmed Queen Seraleth. Ever since our doctors determined that the radiation exposure would eventually be fatal, we've been developing the biointegration technology specifically for this purpose. The process is completely voluntary, added the human medical specialist. We can't force you to undergo something this radical. But I should mention that the alternative is not favorable. Marcus closed his eyes and thought about everything that had led to this moment. A simple diplomatic assignment that had become a friendship, then an alliance, then a war that had reshaped the galaxy. A promise to a young princess that he would show her the volcanoes of Earth. A debt that a queen had declared could never be repaid. "If I agree to this," he said finally, "will I still be human?" "Where it matters, yes," replied Admiral Rodriguez. "Your mind, your values, your stubborn refusal to accept the impossible, that's all staying exactly the same. You have to be able to survive long enough to put those qualities to good use. And I'll be able to fulfill my promise to show Princess Lyralii the volcanoes of Earth." Among other things, the princess said with a smile, "I've been preparing for a diplomatic mission to Earth for several months now. Someone needs to coordinate the new interspecies military protocols, and I thought perhaps we could handle that together." Marcus opened his eyes and looked around the room one more time. Every face showed the same expression, hope mixed with determination, and something that looked very much like family affection. "Your Majesty," he said finally, "I accept your offer, but I have one condition." "Name it." "After the biointegration is complete, I want to return to Earth for a visit. There are some people I need to see, some things I need to take care of before I begin this new phase of my existence." "Of course," Queen Saraleth said with obvious relief. "Family obligations are always honored in Zephyrian culture." "Then, let's do this thing," Marcus said, settling back into the medical bed as the biotechnicians began their preparations. "I have promises to keep and volcanoes to show to a certain princess." The biointegration process took 3 days and was unlike anything in human medical experience. Marcus's consciousness remained intact throughout, but he could feel his body being systematically rebuilt at the cellular level. It was not painful exactly, but it was profoundly strange, like being dismantled and reassembled while remaining fully aware of every step. When it was over, Marcus Chun found himself in a body that was recognizably his own, but fundamentally transformed. He retained his human appearance, but his skin had taken on a slight silvery sheen similar to Zephyrian coloration. His strength and endurance had increased dramatically, and he could feel an entirely new sensory apparatus that allowed him to perceive electromagnetic fields and gravitational variations. Most remarkably, he had developed a rudimentary version of the Zephyrian ability to communicate through harmonic vibrations, a form of telepathic musical language that allowed for incredibly precise emotional and conceptual exchange. "How do you feel?" asked Princess Lyralii, who had been waiting by his bedside when he awoke from the final integration phase. Marcus sat up, marveling at the complete absence of fatigue or discomfort. "Different, but still me, if that makes sense." "It does. The biointegration process is designed to enhance rather than replace. You're still human, Ambassador. Just a human who happens to be capable of surviving in environments that would kill most of your species. And living for thousands of years. That too." Princess Lyralii's expression became more serious. "Marcus, there's something else you should know. The integration process has had an unexpected side effect." Marcus felt a moment of concern. "What kind of side effect?" "You're now capable of interfacing directly with Zephyrian crystal technology, including the navigation crystals in our starships. In practical terms, this means you can pilot a Zephyrian vessel using thought alone." Marcus absorbed this information with the same calm acceptance that had served him throughout his diplomatic career. "I suppose that could be useful for someone coordinating interspecies military operations." "Extremely useful. And it also means that the trip to Earth you requested, we can leave whenever you're ready." Marcus stood up, testing his new physical capabilities. Everything felt natural despite being fundamentally changed. "Princess, I think I'm ready now. There's a whole galaxy out there that needs protecting, and apparently I've just acquired the tools to help with that job. Plus some promises to keep about volcanoes." Marcus agreed with a smile. As they prepared to leave the medical facility, Queen Saraleth approached with a formal document bearing the seals of the Zephyrian Empire. "Ambassador Chun," she said with ceremonial gravity, by the authority vested in me as Queen of Zephyria, I hereby declare you to be a full member of the royal family, with all rights and responsibilities thereof. Your official title is now Prince Ambassador Marcus Chun, Special Coordinator for Galactic Defense. Marcus accepted the document with appropriate solemnity, though he couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of his situation. Your Majesty, I have to ask, what would my parents think about their son becoming an alien prince? I suspect they would be very proud, Queen Saraleth replied. After all, you saved a princess, won a war, and earned the friendship of an entire galaxy. Most parents would consider that a life well lived, even if it took being rebuilt from the ground up to accomplish it. Especially then, transformation in service to others is the highest honor in Zephyrian culture. As Marcus prepared to leave Zephyria Prime for his return to Earth, he reflected on the strange path that had brought him to this point. A simple diplomatic assignment had become a friendship, which had become a war, which had become a new life as something more than human, but not quite alien. Princess Lyralii, now his adoptive sister and diplomatic partner, would accompany him to Earth as part of the new interspecies coordination initiative. Together, they would work to prepare the galaxy for whatever threats might emerge from the vast darkness between the stars. And someday, when their official duties allowed, he would keep his promise to show her the volcanoes of Earth, where mountains breathed fire and the impossible became merely another challenge to overcome. The human who had refused to let a princess fall had become something new, a bridge between species, a guardian of worlds, and a living symbol of what could be accomplished when different peoples chose to trust each other completely. As their ship departed for Earth, Marcus Chun, Prince Ambassador of Zephyria, Coordinator of Galactic Defense, and still fundamentally human despite everything, looked out at the stars and smiled. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and full of wonders yet to be discovered, and he had forever to explore it all.